Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the renowned founder of the Theosophical Society and one of history's most influential esoteric teachers, spent decades studying the ancient wisdom traditions that speak of humanity's spiritual evolution. According to her extensive research into Eastern philosophy, Tibetan Buddhism, and Hindu metaphysics, the human soul undergoes countless incarnations across many lifetimes, each serving as a classroom for spiritual growth and karmic resolution. But what happens when a soul approaches its final earthly incarnation? Blavatsky taught that there are unmistakable signs that indicate when someone is living their last life on earth, preparing for what she called the Great Liberation from the Wheel of Rebirth. These signs are not arbitrary, but represent the culmination of thousands of years of soul development across multiple incarnations. The concept of a final life doesn't mean death or ending, but rather graduation to higher planes of existence. In Blavatsky's teachings, drawn from ancient Tibetan manuscripts and Hindu scriptures, a soul that has completed its earthly lessons no longer needs to return to physical incarnation. Instead, it moves on to serve as a guide, teacher, or spiritual helper for those still working through their earthly curriculum. Understanding these signs isn't about predicting death or creating fear, but about recognizing the profound spiritual maturity that indicates a soul's readiness to transcend the material plane. Blavatsky emphasized that these markers appear gradually over the course of a lifetime, becoming more pronounced as the individual approaches their spiritual graduation. Throughout her works, particularly in The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky described how advanced souls exhibit certain characteristics that set them apart from those still in earlier stages of their spiritual evolution. These signs serve as both recognition tools and inspiration for others on the spiritual path. Today, we'll explore the 5 primary indicators that Helena Blavatsky identified as signs of a final incarnation, each representing a different aspect of spiritual mastery that the soul has achieved through countless lifetimes of experience and growth. Chapter 2, Sign 1, Complete Emotional Detachment. The first sign Blavatsky identified of a final incarnation is what she termed divine detachment, a state of complete emotional equilibrium that transcends the typical human reactions to life circumstances. This doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring, but rather achieving a state of inner peace that remains unshaken by external events, whether they appear positive or negative. In her writings, Blavatsky explained that souls in their final incarnation have learned through countless lifetimes that all earthly experiences, whether labeled as success or failure, joy or sorrow, are temporary and ultimately illusory. They have developed what Eastern philosophy calls witness consciousness, the ability to observe life's events without becoming emotionally entangled in them. This emotional detachment manifests as an unusual calmness in the face of crisis, loss, or even great fortune. People in their final incarnation rarely exhibit extreme emotional reactions because they understand the temporary nature of all earthly circumstances. They've learned that attachment to outcomes creates suffering, while detachment creates freedom. Blavatsky noted that this detachment often puzzles others who haven't reached this level of spiritual development. Family members and friends might misinterpret this calmness as indifference or lack of caring, when in reality it represents the highest form of compassion, love without attachment, caring without clinging. The individual experiencing this sign often feels as though they're watching their life unfold from a higher perspective, participating fully while remaining internally unmoved by the drama. They understand that their true identity exists beyond the personality and circumstances of this particular lifetime. This detachment extends to material possessions, social status, and even personal relationships. While they love deeply, they don't cling desperately. They can lose everything and remain at peace, or gain everything and remain humble, because their sense of worth comes from their connection to the eternal rather than the temporal. Blavatsky taught that this sign often appears gradually, sometimes mistaken for depression or emotional numbness, but it's actually the opposite. It's the achievement of perfect emotional balance and spiritual maturity. Chapter 3. Sign 2. Natural spiritual wisdom. The second indicator of a final incarnation, according to Blavatsky's teachings, is the spontaneous emergence of profound spiritual wisdom without formal religious training or extensive study. This phenomenon occurs because the soul has accumulated vast spiritual knowledge across multiple lifetimes, and in their final incarnation, this wisdom naturally surfaces from the depths of their consciousness. Blavatsky described this as intuitive knowing, an immediate understanding of spiritual principles that bypasses intellectual learning. Individuals exhibiting this sign often find themselves knowing things they cannot explain, having learned, understanding complex metaphysical concepts without studying them, and possessing insights that seem to come from an ancient source within their own being. This wisdom manifests in several ways: an innate understanding of karma and cosmic justice, a natural comprehension of the interconnectedness of all life, and an ability to see through the illusions that trap most people in cycles of suffering. They often become natural counselors and advisors, even without formal training, because their words carry the weight of accumulated lifetimes of experience. Unlike intellectual knowledge, which must be acquired through study and memorization, this spiritual wisdom feels familiar and comfortable, as if they're remembering rather than learning. When exposed to ancient spiritual texts from various traditions, whether Hindu, Buddhist, Christian mystic, or esoteric, they recognize fundamental truths that resonate deeply with their inner knowing. Blavatsky emphasized that this wisdom comes with a natural humility. Those in their final incarnation don't boast about their insights or use their understanding to elevate themselves above others. Instead, they share their wisdom quietly and naturally, often without even realizing how profound their words are to those who hear them. This sign also includes an intuitive understanding of life's purpose and meaning. While others struggle with existential questions about why they're here and what life means, those in their final incarnation simply know. They understand their role in the greater cosmic plan and feel a deep sense of purpose that guides their actions. The wisdom they possess transcends religious boundaries, incorporating truths from all authentic spiritual traditions while being trapped by none. Chapter 4. Sign 3. Desire for solitude and simplicity. Blavatsky taught that souls approaching their final incarnation develop an increasing desire for solitude and simplicity, not from misanthropy or depression, but from a deep understanding that their inner journey requires space and freedom from external distractions. This represents a natural pulling away from the complexity and drama of ordinary social life toward a more contemplative and internally focused existence. This desire for solitude differs significantly from loneliness or social anxiety. Those experiencing this sign actively choose solitude because they find it nourishing and necessary for their spiritual well-being. They may have been social and outgoing in earlier years, but as they approach their final incarnation, they increasingly value quiet time for reflection, meditation, and inner communion with higher consciousness. The simplicity aspect manifests as a gradual shedding of unnecessary possessions, relationships, and activities that don't serve their spiritual growth. They begin to see clearly what truly matters and what merely creates complexity without adding value to their lives. This isn't about becoming a hermit, but about becoming very selective about how they spend their time and energy. Blavatsky noted that this process often involves releasing old friendships that were based on superficial connections and gravitating toward relationships that support spiritual growth and authentic communication. They may find that many of their previous social connections no longer feel meaningful or necessary. Their living spaces often reflect this inner shift toward simplicity. Fewer possessions, cleaner lines, and an emphasis on creating peaceful environments that support meditation and contemplation. They're drawn to natural settings and may feel an increased need to spend time in nature rather than busy urban environments. This sign also includes a reduced interest in entertainment, gossip, news, and other forms of mental stimulation that once seemed important. Instead, they prefer activities that nourish the soul, reading spiritual texts, spending time in nature, practicing meditation, or engaging in creative expression that connects them to something greater than themselves. The solitude they seek is not empty but full, filled with inner communion, spiritual practice, and a growing awareness of their connection to universal consciousness. Chapter 5. Sign 4. Unusual life circumstances. According to Blavatsky's observations, souls in their final incarnation often experience unusual or challenging life circumstances that seem disproportionate to their personal actions or choices. This isn't random suffering, but rather the final clearing of karmic debts accumulated across multiple lifetimes. The soul has chosen to resolve all remaining karmic obligations in this final incarnation rather than carrying them forward. These unusual circumstances might include unexpected losses, health challenges, relationship difficulties, financial setbacks, or other trials that seem to occur without clear cause and effect relationships to the person's current behavior. The key difference is how the individual responds to these challenges, with acceptance, grace, and understanding, rather than bitterness or victimization. Blavatsky taught that souls preparing for graduation from earthly incarnations often take on additional karmic burdens to help accelerate their spiritual completion. They may experience the consequences of actions from previous lifetimes in rapid succession, creating periods of intense challenge that ultimately serve to clear their karmic slate completely. Another aspect of unusual circumstances involves being placed in situations where they can serve others' spiritual growth, often at personal cost. They might find themselves in positions where they sacrifice their own comfort, success, or happiness to help others learn important spiritual lessons. This isn't martyrdom, but conscious service to the greater good. These individuals often experience what Blavatsky called accelerated learning, situations that force rapid spiritual growth and understanding. What might normally take years to learn, they experience in months or weeks through intensive circumstances that strip away illusions and reveal essential truths about life and consciousness. The unusual circumstances also include unexpected opportunities for spiritual service or teaching. Doors open in mysterious ways, allowing them to share their wisdom or help others in ways they never anticipated. Their life path might take sudden turns that seem random but ultimately serve a greater spiritual purpose. Throughout these experiences, they maintain their inner peace and understanding, recognizing that everything happening is part of their soul's final curriculum before graduation from earthly school. Chapter 6. Sign 5. Natural compassion without judgment. The fifth and perhaps most significant sign of a final incarnation is the development of universal compassion, a deep, unconditional love for all beings that transcends personal preferences, cultural boundaries, and moral judgments. Blavatsky taught that this represents the ultimate flowering of spiritual evolution, where the individual recognizes the fundamental unity underlying all apparent diversity. This compassion differs from ordinary human sympathy or empathy because it includes even those who might be considered enemies, criminals, or morally reprehensible by society's standards. Those in their final incarnation understand that all beings are at different stages of spiritual evolution, and they feel genuine love and concern for everyone's ultimate spiritual welfare, regardless of their current behavior or circumstances. The absence of judgment is a key component of this sign. While they can clearly discern right from wrong and make practical decisions about their own behavior and associations, they don't condemn others for their choices. They understand that everyone is doing the best they can, given their current level of consciousness and spiritual development. This compassion extends beyond humans to include all forms of life. They often develop a natural reverence for animals, plants, and even inanimate objects, recognizing the divine consciousness present in all manifestations of creation. Their compassion becomes truly universal rather than selective. Blavatsky noted that this compassion is accompanied by a deep desire to reduce suffering wherever possible, but without the emotional attachment that creates additional suffering for the helper. They serve others naturally and joyfully, not from obligation or guilt, but from a genuine recognition of the interconnectedness of all life. Their presence becomes healing and comforting to others, even without specific action on their part. People are naturally drawn to them and feel better in their company, though they may not understand why. This happens because their consciousness radiates peace, acceptance, and love without conditions or expectations. This universal compassion also includes compassion for themselves, recognizing their own journey with the same understanding and acceptance they extend to others. Chapter 7. The Ancient Wisdom. Behind these signs. Helena Blavatsky didn't create these concepts from her imagination, but drew extensively from ancient wisdom traditions that had recognized these patterns for millennia. In her research of Tibetan Buddhism, Hindu philosophy, and other esoteric traditions, she found consistent teachings about the characteristics of souls approaching what Buddhists call nirvana, and Hindus refer to as moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The Tibetan manuscripts that influence Blavatsky's work describe these signs as marks of the perfected one, indicators that a soul has completed its earthly education and is ready to graduate to higher planes of existence. These ancient texts, some dating back thousands of years, recognized the same patterns that Blavatsky observed in her contemporary students and colleagues. In Hindu tradition, the Bhagavad Gita describes the characteristics of one who has achieved sthita prajna, perfect spiritual balance. These descriptions align remarkably well with Blavatsky's 5 signs: emotional equanimity, natural wisdom, detachment from worldly concerns, acceptance of life's challenges, and universal compassion. Buddhist teachings about the arhat, one who has achieved enlightenment and will not be reborn, also correspond to these signs. The Buddha taught that certain qualities naturally emerge in those who have transcended the illusions that bind most people to repeated incarnations. Blavatsky's unique contribution was synthesizing these various traditions and presenting them in a way that Westerners could understand and apply to their own spiritual development. She emphasized that these signs aren't exclusive to Eastern philosophy, but can be found in the mystical traditions of all authentic spiritual paths, including Christian mysticism, Sufism, and ancient Greek philosophy. The universality of these teachings across cultures and centuries suggests that they represent genuine insights into human spiritual evolution rather than cultural artifacts or religious beliefs. They describe natural stages of consciousness development that occur regardless of specific religious training or cultural background. Understanding this ancient foundation helps us recognize that experiencing these signs connects us to a vast lineage of spiritual seekers who have walked this path before us. Chapter 8. Recognizing these signs in yourself. Self-recognition of these signs requires honest self-examination without either false humility or spiritual pride. Blavatsky emphasized that true spiritual advancement is accompanied by genuine humility. Those who are actually in their final incarnation rarely proclaim it loudly or use it to elevate themselves above others. The first step in self-recognition is examining your emotional responses to life's events. Do you find yourself maintaining inner peace even during traditionally stressful situations? Has your emotional range become more stable and less reactive over time? This doesn't mean you don't feel emotions, but rather that emotions don't control your inner state or decision-making process. Consider your relationship with knowledge and wisdom. Do you find yourself understanding spiritual concepts intuitively, even without formal study? Do people naturally turn to you for advice or guidance? When you speak about spiritual matters, do your words seem to come from a deeper source than your conscious mind? Examine your social preferences and lifestyle choices. Have you been naturally gravitating toward more solitude and simplicity? Do you find that many activities and relationships that once seemed important now feel unnecessary or draining? This shift should feel natural and peaceful rather than forced or bitter. Reflect on the unusual circumstances in your life. Have you experienced challenges that seemed disproportionate to your actions, yet found yourself responding with acceptance rather than resentment? Do opportunities for service or spiritual growth appear in unexpected ways? Most importantly, honestly assess your capacity for compassion. Can you genuinely feel love and concern for people whose behavior you strongly disagree with? Do you find yourself naturally avoiding judgment while still maintaining clear discernment about right and wrong? Blavatsky warned against spiritual materialism, using these signs as badges of achievement rather than recognizing them as natural expressions of spiritual maturity. The goal isn't to accumulate signs like spiritual trophies, but to allow genuine transformation to unfold naturally. Chapter 9. What these signs don't mean. It's crucial to understand what these signs don't represent to avoid misinterpretation or spiritual bypassing. Blavatsky was clear that being in a final incarnation doesn't mean you're superior to others, have achieved perfection, or are exempt from continued growth and learning. These signs don't indicate that you're better than others who haven't developed them. Every soul is exactly where they need to be in their spiritual evolution, and comparing levels of development creates the kind of spiritual pride that actually indicates less advancement, not more. Blavatsky taught that true spiritual maturity includes recognizing the perfect appropriateness of everyone's current stage of development. Experiencing these signs doesn't mean you've achieved perfection or completed all possible growth. Even in a final incarnation, there's continued learning, refinement, and service. The difference is that future growth happens on different planes of existence rather than through physical rebirth. These signs also don't predict when someone will die or guarantee any specific timeline. Being in a final incarnation might mean completing this life naturally and not returning, but it doesn't create urgency or suggest that death is imminent. Some souls in final incarnations live long, productive lives focused on service. The signs don't exempt anyone from practical responsibilities or social obligations. Those in final incarnations still need to work, maintain relationships, handle finances, and deal with everyday concerns. Spiritual advancement doesn't mean abandoning worldly responsibilities, but handling them with greater wisdom and detachment. Perhaps most importantly, these signs don't justify withdrawing from life or becoming passive. True spiritual advancement actually increases one's capacity for effective action in the world, but the motivation shifts from personal gain to service of the greater good. Blavatsky emphasized that recognizing these signs should increase humility and compassion rather than creating a sense of specialness or separation from others. The ultimate sign of spiritual maturity is the complete absence of spiritual pride. Chapter 10. The Purpose of Final Incarnations. According to Blavatsky's teachings, souls in their final incarnation serve specific purposes that benefit not only their own spiritual completion, but also the evolution of human consciousness as a whole. Understanding these purposes can help those experiencing these signs align more consciously with their deeper mission. The primary purpose is completing any remaining karmic obligations. This includes resolving relationships, paying karmic debts, and learning final lessons that couldn't be completed in previous lifetimes. The soul often takes on additional challenges to accelerate this completion process, explaining why final incarnations sometimes involve unusual difficulties. Another crucial purpose is service to humanity's spiritual evolution. Souls in final incarnations often serve as bridges between higher consciousness and ordinary human awareness, helping to anchor new spiritual energies and understanding on Earth. They may do this through teaching, healing, creative expression, or simply by embodying higher consciousness in their daily lives. These individuals often incarnate during periods of significant human transition to help facilitate collective spiritual growth. Their presence and influence help prepare humanity for evolutionary leaps in consciousness, even if their specific contributions seem small or unrecognized during their lifetime. Blavatsky taught that souls in final incarnations also serve as examples and inspiration for others on the spiritual path. By demonstrating what's possible in terms of inner peace, wisdom, and compassion, they show others what awaits them in their own spiritual development. Many are called to preserve and transmit ancient wisdom for future generations. They might be drawn to study, teach, or write about spiritual principles, ensuring that essential knowledge doesn't get lost during periods of human forgetfulness or spiritual darkness. Some serve by testing and refining spiritual teachings through their own experience, helping to separate authentic wisdom from cultural additions or misunderstandings that have accumulated over time. Chapter 11. Living Consciously as a Final Incarnation. If you recognize these signs in yourself, Blavatsky taught that the most important response is to live with increased consciousness and intentionality, focusing on service rather than personal achievement. This isn't about changing your entire life dramatically, but about approaching your existing circumstances with greater awareness of their spiritual significance. The first priority is completing your karmic obligations with grace and wisdom. This means addressing unresolved relationships with compassion, fulfilling your responsibilities without attachment to outcomes, and accepting whatever challenges arise as opportunities for final purification and growth. Embrace your role as a spiritual servant, whether that manifests through formal teaching, informal guidance, creative expression, or simply embodying higher consciousness in your daily interactions. Your primary job is to be a clear channel for divine love and wisdom, allowing these qualities to flow through you naturally without forcing or manipulating. Cultivate your connection to higher consciousness through regular spiritual practice. This might include meditation, prayer, study of sacred texts, time in nature, or whatever methods help you maintain awareness of your eternal identity beyond this temporary personality and circumstances. Use your natural wisdom to help others when appropriate, but avoid the trap of trying to convince or convert anyone. Those who are ready for spiritual growth will be naturally drawn to what you have to offer, while others may not yet be prepared for higher understanding. Focus on simplifying your life in whatever ways feel authentic and natural. This isn't about becoming ascetic, but about eliminating distractions and complications that interfere with your spiritual priorities and service to others. Practice conscious compassion, recognizing the divine nature in everyone you encounter while maintaining appropriate boundaries and practical wisdom in your relationships and interactions. Most importantly, maintain your humility and continue learning. Being in a final incarnation doesn't mean you have nothing left to discover. It means you're ready for the advanced curriculum that comes with spiritual maturity. Chapter 12. The Great Liberation. Helena Blavatsky taught that recognizing and embracing your final incarnation is ultimately about preparing for what she called the Great Liberation. Freedom from the wheel of rebirth and graduation to higher planes of existence where continued evolution happens without the limitations of physical embodiment. This liberation doesn't mean cessation of existence, but rather expansion into a broader, more complete form of consciousness. Just as graduating from school doesn't end learning, but opens doors to more advanced education and greater service opportunities, completing earthly incarnations opens possibilities for types of growth and service that transcend physical limitations. The process of liberation involves gradually releasing attachment to personal identity while maintaining full engagement with life. This paradox, becoming less personally invested while remaining more consciously active, represents the ultimate spiritual maturity that Blavatsky observed in those approaching their final incarnation. Those experiencing this liberation often report a growing sense of coming home, even while still fully engaged in earthly life. They feel increasingly connected to something vast and eternal, while simultaneously becoming more present and effective in their daily activities and relationships. The Great Liberation also involves recognizing that all the experiences, challenges, and relationships of this lifetime and all previous lifetimes have been perfectly orchestrated for spiritual growth. This recognition brings deep gratitude and peace, along with readiness to release the need for further earthly experience. Blavatsky emphasized that this liberation is not an ending, but a graduation to new forms of existence and service. Those who complete their earthly incarnations often continue working for humanity's spiritual evolution from higher planes, serving as guides and teachers for those still working through their earthly curriculum. Understanding these teachings about final incarnations isn't meant to create anxiety about where you are in your spiritual evolution, but to inspire continued growth, service, and recognition of the magnificent journey that every soul is traveling toward ultimate liberation and union with divine consciousness. Have you noticed any of these 5 signs in your own life or spiritual journey? Which sign resonates most strongly with your current experience, and how has your understanding of spirituality evolved over the years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights might be exactly what another soul needs to hear on their path. If this exploration of Helena Blavatsky's wisdom has provided valuable insights for your spiritual growth, please subscribe to our channel for more teachings from history's greatest spiritual masters and mystics.